Why Jason O'Brien is calling himself the Miracle Man. A story of survival as Australia's infection rate continues to fall and the most populous state eases lockdown restrictions. Relief for New Zealanders. 4 weeks of lockdown come to an end. It's back to work and the coffee shop.
Oh, amazing. It's never tasted better.
The different steps countries are taking to ease restrictions. Some consider a quicker return to normality. And the 250th anniversary of Lieutenant James Cook's arrival on this continent. We examine the significance and the controversy.
This is SBS World News with Janice Petersen.
Good evening. New South Wales has become the third Australian state to announce the first tentative steps to easing COVID-19 restrictions. But it came as 5 new deaths were reported from a Sydney aged care home that's faced one of the country's worst virus outbreaks. In other developments today, as more countries ease restrictions, World Health authorities warn the pandemic is far from over. 2.4 million Australians have downloaded the COVID Safe app, and Treasury defends the delay in the rollout of JobKeeper payments. Around the world, more than 3 million people have contracted coronavirus. Over 211,000 have died. 5 more deaths have been confirmed in New South Wales today, bringing the total national death toll to 88. While more than 6,700 Australians have been infected since the start of the outbreak. There are only 1,013 active cases. And of 500,000 tests that have been conducted around the country, less than 1.5% have come back positive. First, the latest from Australia. And the nation's most populous state will see a slight easing of restrictions later this week.
He describes himself as a miracle man. Jason O'Brien from the western New South Wales town of Dubbo has survived COVID-19.
I'm just grateful that these people here, my blue angels and the doctors, they put my life back, give me my life back.
He was given a departure to remember from hospital. With the rate of infection continuing to decline, New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian was today the bearer of good news. From Friday, 2 adults will be able to visit anybody else in their home as long as they are healthy and social distancing measures are adhered to. But this first loosening of social restrictions came with a warning. If
you have a sniffle, you shouldn't be visiting anybody. You shouldn't be out of your house, frankly. You should be getting tested. So we want to stress that these opportunities to visit others in a household come with qualifications. The
high number of infections and deaths at an Anglican care home in Sydney's west continues to cause alarm. 5 residents, including an 89-year-old woman, have in the past 48 hours died from COVID-19, bringing the total number of deaths linked to the facility to 11. The virus was first discovered there on April 11, and Anglicare says it will be some weeks before the facility is cleared of the virus. CEO Grant Millard said the pandemic is unprecedented in terms of its scale and impact across the world. But more importantly, we know what a devastating effect it is having on older people. Queensland today reported what it's calling a 0 day, with no new infections reported. It plans to push on with a possible mid-May return to classrooms if current trends continue.
We're looking at getting more class contact between teachers and students. That's my number one goal, and I think it's the goal of every other state premier and territory minister as well.
New South Wales followed Queensland and WA in announcing various easing of restrictions. But in Victoria, Premier Daniel Andrews has steadfastly refused to join them.
This is not over. And any sense of complacency would simply be wrong. It would run the risk of giving back all the great gains that we've made.
A number of Victoria's construction workers were tested on site today, part of a testing blitz aiming to reach 100,000 people in the next fortnight. The emphasis will be on keeping testing levels high around the country when restrictions are eventually eased. A Pathology Technology Australia audit found testing can be ramped up to 50 or 60,000 a day at an estimated cost of $1.8 billion.
We want to be able to do the testing, and combined with the COVID Safe app, we've got the testing and we'll have the tracking and tracing.
The spread of the virus from unknown sources has reduced dramatically. Only one of today's confirmed cases was via community transmission, a statistic Health Minister Greg Hunt says is one of the most important he's seen in his time dealing with COVID-19.
It means that as a country, we are not just flattening the curve, but we are consolidating it, extending it and securing it.
Minister Hunt added that nearly 2.5 million people have downloaded the COVID Safe app since it launched on Sunday night. Matt Cannellan, SBS World News.
There was only one new case of COVID-19 in Western Australia today, but there are concerns the state's low numbers could be threatened with people arriving back from overseas. SBS Western Australia correspondent Aaron Fernandez joins us now. Aaron, what's the latest on Australians returning home via Perth?
Well, Janice, the first of 4 international flights that are expected to arrive in Perth this week has touched down. The flight from Kuala Lumpur arrived in the early hours of this morning, carrying between 80 and 90 passengers. All of those people have been taken to hotels in Perth CBD for their 14-day quarantine. And while there aren't any positive cases among that group, there is concern that their arrival could lead to a spike in the relatively low number of cases that WA has reported recently. The WA Premier Mark McGowan today said he's frustrated that some of those passengers didn't return home sooner.
It's pretty annoying. So I don't want to point the finger at people because you don't know their individual circumstances, but it would have been nice had people not gone overseas when we knew the virus was around. And secondly, if they were overseas, if they could, they should have come home earlier.
And Janice, the second flight is expected to arrive in Perth from Johannesburg tomorrow morning, carrying 257 Australian passengers. The majority of those, or a significant number of those passengers, are believed to be West Australians, and as a result, they won't be sent to hotels in the CBD for quarantine. They'll be sent to Rottnest Island. That continues the WA government's preference of keeping eastern staters and interstate travellers in the hotels while sending WA residents to Rottnest, and that's ahead of 2 other international flights from France and India that are expected to arrive over the course of this week. Janice.
Plenty of interest in those arrivals. Aaron Fernandez reporting live from Perth Airport. Well, for a month, New Zealanders have endured some of the toughest lockdown restrictions in the world. The nation was effectively closed. But today, the level 4 lockdown was reduced to level 3 and an estimated 400,000 New Zealanders returned to work. 2 cases of COVID-19 were confirmed overnight, and experts warn that the virus has yet to be eliminated.
Yes. That first sip of store-bought coffee after almost 5 weeks in isolation.
Oh, amazing. It's never tasted better.
So stoked.
Honestly, it's so good to have a coffee, like
the first real coffee.
Traffic jams at takeaway stores as New Zealanders celebrate the work they have all done to flatten the curve. The number of cars on the road, a sign the economy is on the move again.
Every day that there's $0 going into the bank account is concerning, as you can imagine, but it's nice to see our customers again, even if it is through a Perspex screen.
At level 3, around 75% of the economy is operating, with key sectors like building and construction, forestry, manufacturing and contactless retail starting back up.
The level 3 restrictions are similar to what we have now in Australia. People are encouraged to work from home if they can, and schools will open tomorrow, but only for students who cannot study at home. 1,000 road and rail workers are back on the job, but gyms, cinemas and public places remain closed.
Johnston and Liana.
Retail purchases must be contactless. Customers cannot enter non-essential stores regardless of their size. New Zealanders also not allowed to get a haircut yet.
We will have to keep stamping COVID out until there is a vaccine. We are not done, but you can see that we have managed successfully under lockdown to end community transmission. We need to keep doing that as we go.
The total number of confirmed cases in New Zealand is 1,124. In Australia, it's 6,727. But Australia's population is 5 times larger. On average, New Zealand has 23 cases per 100,000 people. In Australia, it's 27 cases per 100,000. A similar result despite New Zealand's much stricter lockdown. But the real payoff for Kiwis could be a return to near normality in just a few weeks if the virus is wiped out. Professor Sean Hendy is a physicist who's been working on the government's modelling.
Best case scenario, in about a month, we are absolutely sure we've eliminated it. Worst case scenario, we probably see numbers starting to creep up again in about a month. That'll tell us that level 3 probably wasn't that effective and we did have some undetected trains of transmission.
The measures will be reviewed in 2 weeks, and if there's no rise in cases, the government has flagged restrictions on gatherings could ease. But for now, even a little bit of freedom is a welcome relief. Lucy Murray, SBS World News.
With the daily death tolls continuing to fall, countries are taking different approaches to easing lockdowns. But there's uncertainty around how far some should go, with some considering a quicker return to normality than others.
When a lockdown is eased, it's perhaps no surprise that the first stop for many is the hairdressers.
Vu ma tête, je pense que ça fait du bien de revenir chez le coiffeur, c'est sûr. C'est pas un moment que j'attendais, je voulais pas le faire moi-même, donc enfin, ouais.
This is just stage 1 of Switzerland's relaxing of restrictions. Dentists are taking appointments, while garden centres are trading again. A wider reopening of businesses is planned for June. The World Health Organization will keep a close eye on the Swiss strategy from its Geneva base. It's warning governments to tread softly when loosening a lockdown.
If the calculation is made and then the restrictions are eased too early, you may be back in a situation where lockdowns have to be reimposed, and that again has an increased impact and potentially an even greater impact on livelihoods.
In nearby Germany, shoppers have been able to visit small retailers for a week, but now nearly all states have mandated the wearing of face masks. Those without one face a fine.
Manchmal kriegt man halt ein bisschen, ist es halt warm darunter und so weiter, aber wenn es halt ist, dann muss man es halt machen, ja? Dann ist es natürlich für die Allgemeinheit, dann ist es natürlich gut, dann mache ich das auch und dann ist es auch kein Thema, auch wenn ich ein bisschen schwitze.
The French government is due to announce its schedule for easing social distancing restrictions later this evening. But plans for a COVID-19 tracking app similar to Australia's are proving contentious. The Prime Minister bowing to pressure from MPs to allow a parliamentary debate over the software's use.
Mais l'on sait bien qu'une telle application, une fois dans les téléphones des citoyens, pourrait servir aussi, par exemple, à tracer des migrants, des immigrants, à tracer des délinquants, à tracer des citoyens qui ne sont pas en règle avec telle ou telle situation légale.
Workers in Spanish factories are clocking on for the first time in 6 weeks. This car maker hopes production can return to pre-pandemic levels by June. There's still broad support for social distancing in Britain, but there's also increasing concern that the lockdown is fraying at the edges.
I just noticed lately a lot of people are still not using even the mask or anything to cover. Let's hope then that it won't increase.
Boris Johnson has asked the British people to contain their impatience, but some of his own ministers believe that frustration with the lockdown is growing because of the lack of a clear exit plan. The Prime Minister will be expected to provide one. Downing Street says details of a tweaked lockdown will be revealed this week.
I know that lockdown is hard for so many people, but let us all have the resolve to see this through.
The UK was one of the last European countries to enter a lockdown, and it could be one of the last to emerge. In London, Ben Lewis, SBS World News.
Well, despite the easing of restrictions in many countries, the World Health Organization says the crisis is far from over. The head of the UN agency says there are now deep concerns that in the shadow of the coronavirus, children across the globe are being exposed to other diseases by not being vaccinated.
4 months into the crippling global pandemic, and nations continue to face varying rates of infection.
a large proportion of the population still remains susceptible.
As countries like Germany ease restrictions to get the economy moving, the head of the WHO urges caution.
The pandemic is far from over.
Russia in its 5th week of lockdown, overnight registering more than 6,200 new cases. Its tally now surpassing China at more than 82,000. In Senegal, the government is testing everyone. At this lab, they're developing $1 testing kits.
The idea is to rapidly produce 2 to 4 million kits, not just for us, but for African countries.
At the Kenya-Uganda border, huge lines of trucks stretch as far as the eye can see as both nations carry out mandatory testing. The WHO is also warning malaria cases in sub-Saharan Africa could double as border restrictions leave dozens of countries short of vaccines. And globally, a disruption to health services could leave children exposed to a multitude of other diseases because they're failing to get vaccinated.
WHO is deeply concerned about the impact the pandemic will have on other health services, especially for children.
The WHO's handling of the pandemic has also come under the microscope. Today, it reaffirmed its message, now is not the time for politics.
If we're not united, the virus will exploit the cracks between us and continue to create havoc.
People across the globe forced to adapt, like this wedding in Israel.
We want to be happy and careful at the same time.
The country began reopening businesses on Sunday. Schools could soon follow suit. In Japan,
gatherings at this park are not allowed.
Robots encourage social distancing, while the Prime Minister has imposed an entry ban on citizens from 14 more countries. In Canada, protesters are demanding an end to lockdowns in Vancouver.
If we want life to get back to the way it was exactly before, it won't.
A clearer picture on the spread of the virus across the globe is heavily reliant on testing. India has just cancelled its orders to buy testing kits from 2 Chinese companies, citing quality issues and a dispute over price. Virginia Langerberg, SBS World News.
Coming up next, has COVID-19 hit our economy harder than the Great Depression? What Treasury officials have to say. Investigations into a children's illness. Is there a link to COVID-19? And locked away and fearing for their lives, inmates left vulnerable as the pandemic hits prisons.
How are you all coping?
It's a little crazy.
Working from home and homeschooling.
It is challenging to do both.
How Aussies are making it work.
We will become better and better at this.
500,000 people visit Machu Picchu every year. Not anymore. The coronavirus lockout is crippling communities who depend on tourism.
I am worried about how this will end.
That's tonight from 8:30 on SBS and On Demand.
Captured Christmas Day, I didn't know that.
World War II changed millions of lives forever.
Why didn't I know this?
Join 4 Hollywood stars as they uncover their grandparents' war stories.
For me, grandmothers. How do you get through that? It's quite a lot to take on board, really.
How extraordinary, I never knew.
I'm learning so much that I had no idea about.
My Grandparents' War starts tomorrow 8:30 on SBS and On Demand.
Upload's that way, OR's the other way. What do you want to do?
Upload.
Anytime you need me, I'll be here for you.
In-app purchase required.
I'm not even supposed to be here.
You think I wanted to fall into the Grand Canyon?
I saw that video. You dabbed on the way down.
That's how you hit the lights.
Yeah, nah.
If you're a small business, you've probably got a lot of questions right now.
which is why you should speak to a professional accountant who's trained in planning and cash flow management strategies. For further support, contact a professional accountant today.
HCF, Australia's largest not-for-profit health fund, has put the care of our members first for nearly 90 years. That's why we'll pay premiums for eligible members for up to 6 months if you're made redundant or stood down. HCF, that's uncommon care.
Now more than ever, we need to look out for each other and keep our communities safe.
From comprehensive analysis weekly on The Point and daily updates on NITV News, we'll bring you all the latest information on coronavirus that affects our mob.
If you think you're unwell, don't delay getting advice.
Now we need to learn how to be adaptive.
We are all in this together, aren't we?
It's about ringing up, seeing if people are okay.
We really need to continue the connection.
The Point, Wednesdays at 8:30 on NITV.
One thing that's been really weird is every time I sing along to music, and I'm listening to a lot more at home alone, I start crying inexplicably for some songs. Just super heightened emotionally.
The Treasury Secretary has revealed the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has hit harder and faster than the Great Depression. 1.4 million Australians are now expected to lose their jobs, with unemployment predicted to hit 10% by June, and many jobs are likely to be gone for good.
On the eve of what was meant to be Budget Week, confirmation the Australian economy is well and truly in the red.
We have never seen an economic shock of this speed, magnitude and shape.
With only 3% of the $320 billion of promised stimulus flowing, the Treasury Secretary denies more should have been done sooner.
Why is it taking so long to get money out the door?
Making literally billions of dollars of payments within 4 weeks of their announcement, I would actually regard as a rapid payment of money.
Revealing Virgin Australia isn't the only major employer to have sought help from Canberra.
Other companies have made requests for assistance to government, and we're aware of other companies that have, been in distress. Clearly, companies in the travel space and in some of the entertainment space fall in that category.
With a quarter of Australia's exports bound for China, the nation will be vital in the economic recovery.
There is great economic return to Australia in continuing to support Chinese development and growth.
Beijing delivering a second economic shock, appearing to warn of a boycott in response to Australia's push for an independent global inquiry into COVID-19.
It's up to the public, the people, to decide. Maybe the ordinary people will see, well, why should we drink Australian wine or to eat Australian beef?
The government is disappointed with the statements by the Chinese ambassador. They were inappropriate in terms of suggesting or intimating that there is potentially some form of economic coercion that China might seek to apply to Australia.
While the Department Secretary is called to voice her concerns directly, the ambassador won't be summoned for a diplomatic dressing down like the former Russian ambassador when Australia objected to his comments.
The government has made our views known and made them clear.
I think China needs to just step back a bit. All that people want to know is, how did it happen? I just think everyone should take a chill pill, including, dare I say it, some of the commentators from China.
That's unlikely to happen. Tonight, China's ambassador has doubled down, accusing Australia of trying to disguise its political manoeuvring over COVID-19.
It certainly doesn't indicate that Australia-China relations are going to return to the sort of happy days of a decade or so ago.
Brett Mason, SBS World News.
The war of words between China and the United States is also escalating tonight, with US President Donald Trump again accusing Beijing of failing to stop the spread of coronavirus. He's now warned China will be held accountable.
In the White House Rose Garden, in a country nearing 56,000 coronavirus deaths and 1 million cases, the president refusing to take responsibility and shifting blame.
We are not happy with China. We are not happy with that whole situation.
because we believe it could have been stopped at the source, it could have been stopped quickly, and it wouldn't have spread all over the world.
The president's rhetoric met with action, tightening laws around tech exports to China. US firms will now need licenses to sell equipment to Chinese companies which support the military. And as the president promised a serious investigation, Beijing hit back.
There are quite a few questions and concerns about whether the US government has been responding to the pandemic in a timely and effective manner. When was the earliest outbreak in the US? Is the US government hiding something? Why is there a rush to pass the buck?
In recent weeks, China has embraced a conspiracy theory emanating from the United States, which falsely blames a US Army reservist for taking the virus from America to Wuhan. As relations between the countries deteriorates, the US Secretary of State has accused China of exploiting the virus to further its global ambitions, citing what he called provocative behaviour in disputed territories in the South China Sea, whilst hiding intelligence related to its handling of the outbreak.
China caused an enormous amount of pain, loss of life, and now a huge challenge for the global economy and the American economy as well, by not sharing the information they had. I am very confident that the Chinese Communist Party will pay a price for what they did here.
Russia warning both sides are risking conflict by making baseless accusations.
The speculation would stoke tensions, raise the stakes and increase the threat of a new conflict.
As Georgia, Ohio and Texas begin to open up, President Trump says 5.4 million Americans have been tested for COVID-19, but he's under pressure to ramp up testing. New York is reporting 1,000 new hospital admissions a day. Its death toll set to top 17,000. Its governor will extend the state's lockdown beyond mid-May, but may ease restrictions in less affected counties.
You want to reopen a region, what is the healthcare capacity in that region? Do we have testing in place? And is testing ready to go?
New York becoming the first state to cancel its Democratic presidential primary. Omar Dehen, SBS World News.
The ACT has thrown a lifeline to temporary visa holders and international students, offering a $450,000 package to assist those ineligible for the federal JobKeeper package. The money will allow local refugee support groups, tertiary institutions and the Red Cross to provide emergency relief to those missing out on Commonwealth assistance, including asylum seekers.
A whole group of people who have been previously self-sufficient have lost employment. So that might be particularly employment in the hospitality sector, Uber drivers, taxi drivers, even childcare workers and cleaners have lost their work. And because they're not eligible for any other government support, that leaves them at the risk of destitution.
The Territory becomes the latest to offer assistance, with Tasmania, South Australia, Queensland and Western Australia announcing similar programs last week. The federal government and the states continue to be at odds over whether students should be back in the classroom. It's released new research that shows as many as half of all students will suffer significant learning setbacks because of the shift to remote learning, while some private schools are bringing all their final year students back to school full time. Those still learning mostly online say the system is unfair.
Final year exams are daunting for many, and Year 12 public school student Ava Vospers now has an added fear.
Especially with the private schools getting to go back full time and public schools still being kind of up in the air, not being able to ask questions, not knowing that I'm definitely understanding the content the same way. It's definitely a struggle in that sense, and I am very worried about my future.
New South Wales is taking a 5-stage approach to bringing students back to the classroom. From mid-May, while public school students will build up from 1 day per week, some private schools will restart full-time, effectively giving students at private schools up to twice as much classroom learning across Term 2. The disparity causing students and parents to call for those in their final years of secondary study to be prioritised for an earlier return.
I do hope that we do get an equal chance like the private schools will.
We're very hopeful that the first few weeks of school returning will result in us being able to possibly truncate the process, to have full-time student attendance face-to-face quicker than we anticipated.
But there are concerns schools are simply not ready for a full-scale return. Some teachers and students are worried about the risk of transmission of COVID-19, despite research released over the weekend, which says children are unlikely to transmit the virus.
We have a significant number of staff across the state who are either aged or who have underlying health conditions, which mean that they really need to be working from home to protect their own health and safety at this stage.
New research released today backed the push to reopen schools for all students as soon as possible. The report found the effects of remote learning are already being felt by the most vulnerable, including students who are already disengaged or from non-English speaking backgrounds.
New research tells us what we already knew, that disadvantaged students are especially affected by the school closures. And if we can get schools back to normal, the people who will be helped most by that are disadvantaged families.
Piling pressure on states and territories such as Victoria, the ACT and Tasmania, which have opted for remote learning to get students back into classrooms soon. Lynn Evelyn, SBS World News.
And there are concerns this period will further widen the education divide in Australia. Tonight, Insight talks to cooped-up families about how they're managing homeschooling. One of those is Rohingya refugee Asma Bahadumia, who's completing Year 12 and sharing 2 devices between 5 siblings.
It's very hard to focus, especially when you have a big family like mine.
I'm not done. You're not done? No.
We were supposed to have tests for every subject and then the HSC, but at the moment they're being cancelled. A lot of us are actually pretty frustrated about that. We feel like extremely unlucky because it's our last year. We're supposed to, and feeling proud that the 13 years of our school has been worth it.
That story on Insight tonight with Mark Fennell at 8:30 on SBS. Well, these are the major coronavirus headlines here and abroad. 5 more deaths have been confirmed at a Western Sydney aged care facility, bringing the total number of deaths nationally to 88. New South Wales is the latest state to announce the easing of some restrictions. But World Health authorities continue to warn the pandemic is far from over. There are growing concerns about a possible link between the coronavirus and a rare but severe inflammatory condition in children. British health officials have issued an urgent alert to doctors amid a rise in young patients presenting with high fevers and swollen glands.
Parents around the world are being reassured about the risks of COVID-19, with the majority of children either asymptomatic or only mildly impacted. But with still so little known about the disease, there are new concerns for the virus's youngest victims.
We have become aware in the last few days of reports of severe illness in children, which might be a Kawasaki-like disease. So Kawasaki disease is a very rare inflammatory condition that occurs in children.
The UK has reported a small but growing number of children presenting with symptoms often seen in toxic shock or Kawasaki disease. They include fever, swelling of glands, low blood pressure, rashes and difficulty breathing. Some, but not all children have tested positive for the coronavirus. Any link between the two certainly not confirmed.
Given that we've got a new presentation of this at a time with a new disease, the possibility, it's not definite, we need to look for other causes as well, but the possibility that there is a link is certainly plausible.
Italy, one of the hardest hit countries, has also reported an increase in children with Kawasaki-like symptoms. Australian infectious disease paediatrician Professor Robert Boy says there could be 2 reasons for this.
One is that the virus itself is causing inflammation and leading to the disorder directly.
The other, he says, is that the coronavirus is causing a secondary bacterial infection that can lead to the Kawasaki disorder. For Australian parents concerned about their children returning to school, Professor Boy stresses the disease mostly affects those under 5, and even then the risk is extremely low.
It needs to be remembered that Kawasaki's disease, although severe, remains very rare.
Abby O'Brien, SBS World News.
The United States has the highest number of COVID-19 cases in the world and also incarcerates the most people. It's no surprise then that American prisons have become a hotbed for the virus, leaving even the most hardened of inmates fearing for their lives.
Marion Correctional Institution in Ohio, where 80% of the inmates, that's more than 2,000 prisoners and over 150 staff, have contracted COVID-19. It makes this prison one of the hottest virus spots in America. And yes, they're hardened criminals, but they're also scared for their lives.
Here, Candace, we cannot get away from each other. Look in the background. You see all of this? This is crazy. We just waiting to die in here. We just sitting ducks in here waiting to die. We cannot get away from each other at all.
James Ellis is one of those infected.
I'm terrified.
He's been locked up for 25 years, but says nothing compares to this.
I feel extremely desperate. I'm willing to do anything to save my life. I don't want to die. Nobody wants to die. You know, and I don't want to think that I'll never see my family again.
James talks of poor hygiene, no soap, inmates making masks out of old T-shirts, and meal times cut to just 2 a day to reduce the spread of the disease. So far, 2 prisoners have died here, but with limited social distancing, he believes it's inevitable the numbers will rise. The Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction told us the prisoners at Marion Institution were provided with a surgical mask and a reusable cloth mask. The amount of disinfectant has been increased. There is not a shortage of cleaner in the facility. Inmates have access to soap and hand sanitizer as well. But across Ohio, nearly 4,000 inmates have contracted COVID-19. Though the governor balks at talk of mass release to reduce the spread.
They are there in prison for a reason, and so when you talk about overriding that is a serious thing.
But that doesn't stop inmates begging. Like these signs, help, stuck on windows at Cook County Jail in Chicago, where nearly 300 have tested positive and staff are panicking.
Now you're putting us at risk, and then we have to go home to our families, putting them at risk.
At the sprawling Alameda County Jail in Santa Rita, California, Jose Bernal says a lack of testing means infection numbers are being underestimated.
And we cannot wait. We cannot wait for the unimaginable nightmare to happen. And we have to let people go home.
In what sense? Set them all free to go back to their families, or what do you mean?
If we are closing down schools, if we are closing down other institutions, other places, because we're saying those institutions, those places are not safe, then I think it's hypocritical of us to say that we're not going to do the same for jails and prisons.
One lucky inmate did manage to make an early escape.
They just called me over the intercom, told me, Irvin, you getting out, you're going home. Pack your stuff. You know, I ain't got much, but you know, it's something.
30 months for him, but it's been close to 30 years for Dwayne Hudson, who suddenly finds himself scared for his life.
The virus don't see color, the virus don't see social positions, and none of that. Don't discriminate no type of way.
In a country that imprisons more people than anywhere else in the world, in the face of a silently spreading virus, even the toughest criminals are finding themselves among the most vulnerable.
Australia's banks remain in focus, with NAB shares coming off a trading halt today after it completed a multi-billion-dollar capital raising. SBS Finance editor Ricardo Gonçalves joins me now with more. And Ricardo, another bank, however, stole the spotlight.
Janice, it was Westpac, which is expected to reveal its first half profit next Monday. What it did tell the market today is that the result will include a $2.2 billion impairment charge, most of that related to COVID-19 impacts. In a statement, its CEO said the world is going through a once-in-a-lifetime health and economic crisis, and that some customers will not be able to navigate the financial and economic changes of this crisis and may not reopen.
When confronted that we are looking at major provisions from the banks, a potential situation where credit conditions are going to be very weak in the Australian economy, an already low and falling interest rate environment, as well as a lot of questions now around bad debts and how long this crisis will go on. Investors are feeling very nervous about diving into bank stocks.
It didn't stop institutional investors from participating in NAB's successful $3 billion capital raising today, which it announced yesterday, along with its 51% fall in half-year profit and a 64% reduction to its dividend. And NAB shares fell by 2.79% today. Westpac was the best of the big four. Businesses hoping to access JobKeeper payments have been given more time to enrol after the ATO extended its application deadline. Business owners looking to be reimbursed for wages paid during the first 2 fortnights of April now have until May the 31st to formally enrol. Previously, the cut-off period was this Thursday. They'll also be given until May the 8th to ensure eligible employees have been paid over the 4-week period, which means business owners have an extra week to secure funds.
That will allow them to sort out their cash flow for the period of time between when the ATO pays them and when they put in their application will be even shorter. Register, pay your staff. There are a range of options for cash flow, whether it be banks, fintechs or others as well.
The government says more than 500,000 businesses have enrolled for the subsidy since applications opened last week. The share of migrants in the Australian population has hit a new record. The Bureau of Statistics says more than 7.5 million, or nearly 30% of all Australians, were born overseas. Now, most arrived from England, China and India. 140,000 are from Sri Lanka, comprising 0.6% of the population and replacing Scotland in the top 10. Economists say nearly 250,000 migrants call Australia home each year, but the COVID-19 restrictions, including border closures, will impact growth.
The 250,000 people that we do rely on in terms of skilled migrants, skilled workers, won't be available to us. And of course, if those people aren't coming to Australia, that means fewer people buying cars, going out shopping, and also demand for housing. So it has wide-ranging effects right the way through the economy.
Last year, 64% of all migrant arrivals were temporary visa holders, including 32% who were international students. Oil prices continue to slide as investors worry about an excess supply of crude, with prices tumbling 14% overnight to less than $11 per barrel. That put pressure on our share market, which closed 0.2% weaker despite being in positive territory for much of the session. Unsurprisingly, energy stocks like Santos declined. CSL also lost ground. Consumer discretionary companies like corporate travel fared the best on hopes of an economic restart, and online furniture retailer Temple & Webster surged after a positive trading update. The Australian dollar has risen overnight, currently buying around 64.5 US cents. And if you've been working on a DIY project lately, you're certainly not alone. In a trading update today, Wesfarmers said sales at its Bunnings stores have surged as customers spent more time at home. However, that's been offset by weakness at Target, which is now under a strategic review. It says while online sales had recorded strong growth, that's pulled back in recent weeks. And Janice, all eyes tomorrow on the ABS and official inflation numbers.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. Well, coming up, the quiet commemoration of James Cook's landing 250 years ago, the significance and the controversy. And the NRL acts as another star breaks the social distancing guidelines.
Tonight at 7:30, the whistle will blow for Great Canadian Railway Journeys, followed by a captivating episode of Insight. And at 9:30, Dateline. Join 4 Hollywood stars as they uncover their grandparents' war stories.
Why are you so nervous?
Grandmother. Oh, come on. Great. My Grandparents' War starts tomorrow 8:30 on SBS and On Demand.
Are you Catherine Harlow?
I was, but that was a long time ago.
Why are you here? You just come back for revenge.
'Cause baby, I know you know I'm the one for you, baby. You love me
What do you plan to do? What's necessary?
Reprisal tomorrow 9:30 on SBS and On Demand.
When things change unexpectedly, we adapt. When things get complicated, we adapt. When we need to do things differently, we adapt. At Newcastle Permanent, we're adapting too, by increasing our Hunter-based call centre team to assist you and help give you some financial peace of mind. Because if one thing's certain in these uncertain times, we're here for you, and we're here for good.
As Australia moves to the NBN, now is the time to join an award-winning provider with service and performance that's out of this world. Turn to TPG.
Get unlimited data with phone line for $59.99 a month.
With more than 1.8 million broadband customers, our group is the second largest internet provider in Australia, connecting you to the internet.
tpg.com.au. You don't give in. You don't give up. You push on when most would have pushed off. You lend a hand, whether a hand was asked for or not. It's called Aussie Spirit for good reason, because it takes spirit to get through times like these. Lucky you've got it in spades. It's what inspires us to be by your side to help. Together we'll get through this. We always do. Search Toyota, here to help.
The diet we've chosen for you is the McDonald's diet.
Is this real?
Join a team of experts as they separate the nutrition from the nonsense. How to Lose Weight Well starts Monday 9:40 on SBS and on demand. Asian Epics continues with Journey to the West, The Demons Strike Back, tonight 9:30 on SBS World Movies.
Tomorrow marks the 250th anniversary since Lieutenant James Cook sailed into Botany Bay and became the first European to set foot on Australia's east coast. While the 29th of April is a significant date in Australian history, it's likely to pass with little fanfare or celebration.
Bruce Howell and Pauline Kirby are students of Australian history. Their passion revolves around the events that led to and followed the arrival of Lieutenant James Cook in 1770.
He's a man of his time, a man of the Enlightenment of the 18th century.
The potential is for it to be a uniting occasion.
Both have contrasting views on the significance of Cook's 8-day stay and the first contact with the First Peoples.
This was the first time on the east coast, as far as we know, the Gweagal people at Kamei Botany Bay saw white people and they thought they were ghosts.
For more than 2 centuries, Cook was seen as a founding father, the first to explore, discover and chart the entire Australian east coastline. The land was named New Holland. He stumbled onto a new frontier for the British Empire, and one that ultimately led to Captain Arthur Phillip's first fleet and arrival 18 years later. But according to sections of the Aboriginal community, Cook is no hero.
When the first fleet arrived, and the diseases, the massacres.
It was here, in Kurnell, when Cook made landfall for the very first time. It was a Sunday on the 29th of April, 250 years ago. And according to his journals, Cook also made contact with the Indigenous people for the very first time. There was an exchange, but there were no deaths.
One of the men threw a spear. Cook fired another musket, and then either one or both of the men ran off to get a shield to protect themselves from the pellets.
These days, Kamei Botany Bay serves as an active port for Sydney. The federal government's multi-million-dollar plans to reenact Cook's voyage has collapsed because of the COVID-19 outbreak. A lost opportunity for one local council.
Extremely disappointed. Something that I was myself, and I know the council is, and our council was really looking forward to it. It was something that would have put Kurnell and the Shire on the map.
And so it was, the first cautious moments of our history.
Unlike the huge bicentennial celebrations of Cook's Landing, which sparked a royal visit in 1970, April 29 this year will come and go without even a flutter.
How are we going to ever gain reconciliation in this country if we don't at least start somewhere and tell the story factually and honestly?
Mike Tomalaris, SBS World News.
2 NRL players have been charged with firearms offences on the day the league confirmed its plans to resume the season on May 28. 4 players in all have been fined for breaking social distancing guidelines in a horror 24 hours for the code.
With the NRL scrambling to return to action on May the 28th,
Today's revelation that Penrith Panthers star Nathan Cleary is the latest player to break social distancing guidelines hasn't helped.
The actions of our players that has come to light over the last couple of days has obviously been disappointing, and we've decided that we need to act swiftly and decisively at this point.
Latrell Mitchell and Josh Addo-Carr were handed $50,000 fines, while Cleary and Tyrone Roberts-Davis each faced $10,000 sanctions. All four are 60% suspended. The NRL's swift action included 1 game bans for each player, again suspended. A looming federal government meeting will be focusing on sport later this week.
National Cabinet is considering issues around both professional and community sports, I understand, this Friday. So we'll be having a discussion at National Cabinet with some guidelines around all those issues.
Mitchell took 3 firearms and surrendered his suspended gun licence to Taree Police today. Both he and Josh Addo-Carr have been charged by police with alleged firearms-related offences. The NRL denies any suggestions the 3 Indigenous players were treated more harshly than Nathan Cleary.
This has nothing to do with culture or race. This has to do with what's expected of all of our players.
All 4 players have 5 days to respond to the sanctions. John Baldock, SBS World News.
SBS Current Affairs show The Feed is asking Australians how they're feeling during the COVID-19 crisis. They've set up a hotline for people to call, and messages and home videos have been flooding in from people right across Australia. We'll be airing some of those calls throughout the next few weeks and months, and tonight we present Chris's story.
The Anzac should be a metaphor for all peoples of this world who have suffered in times of war. My name is Chris Howes. I'm a French horn player and teacher. Teaching via Zoom is the current norm. I miss the one-to-one teaching. This year, I encouraged my students to participate in the dawn service in their street. My grandfather joined the campaign in World War I. My father fought in World War II. He had his closest friend killed beside him in New Guinea. There are no winners in war, only those who lost. The lives of those who returned home changed forever. The day was truly remarkable. People getting together, preparing their own services, and reflecting on what the day means to them. It is a time for all to reflect, to contemplate the sacrifices all those have made in times of war.
Chris's story, thanks to The Feed. Well, coming up, the weather details and the sounds of artificial intelligence on a global stage. Meet the new version of Eurovision.
How are you all coping?
It's a little crazy.
Working from home and homeschooling.
It is challenging to do both.
How Aussies are making it work.
We will become better and better at this.
500,000 people visit Machu Picchu every year. Not anymore. The coronavirus lockout is crippling communities who depend on tourism.
I am worried about how this will end.
That's tonight from 8:30 on SBS and on demand.
Get smart protection for your connected devices at home with Trend Micro Home Network Security at Harvey Norman. Quick and easy to set up. It puts full control at your fingertips. Secure your network and every internet-connected device, like smart TVs, gaming consoles and computers, from online threats. Plus, it includes strong parental controls. Keep the internet safe for your kids on any device and even set time limits for gaming or internet use. Trend Micro Home Network Security, the complete security solution for your connected devices at home. Available now at Harvey Norman.
If you're a small business, you've probably got a lot more questions than answers right now, which is why there's never been a more important time to speak to a professional accountant. They're specifically trained to help with business planning and cash flow management strategies tailored to support your business through these challenging times. They can even lend a hand with applications for government support to make sure you get the help your business needs. For further support and assistance, contact a professional accountant today.
Are you living with mild joint or nerve pain? Caruso's Pain Analgesic for Joints is an alternative for the relief of mild nerve and joint pain.
I would never put anything in my products that I wouldn't give to my family.
Caruso's Therapeutics, capturing the goodness of Mother Nature.
When you see a home loan rate this good, you might start to feel just a little more on top of things. Whether you're thinking about refinancing or buying, we're here to help and ready to talk. Search ANZ Home Loans.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are on our way.
Who doesn't love a railway?
This is the way to travel.
Join us for a welcome escape on the world's most beautiful railway. Starts Thursday 7:30 on SBS and on demand.
One thing that's been really weird is every time I sing along to music, and I'm listening to a lot more at home alone, I start crying inexplicably for some songs. Just super heightened emotionally.
To the weather, and the Bureau of Meteorology is warning the country to brace for a widespread cold snap later this week. Extreme cold and wet conditions are expected, including well below average temperatures. Onshore winds will move quickly through the southeast, bringing incessant rain and minor to moderate flooding inland. So, taking a look at the forecast, a cold front is bringing brisk winds and isolated showers to southern Western Australia, and a trough is causing patchy rain over eastern Tasmania and southern New South Wales. Checking the major centres now, possible heavy falls are expected to hit Adelaide, Hobart, Sydney, Canberra and Melbourne. It should be fine and bright in Perth, cloudy skies for Darwin and Brisbane. Further afield, fine weather for Wellington and Christchurch, heavy rain for Samoa and Nadi. To Southeast Asia, Bangkok and Singapore should brace for thunderstorms, and there's consistent rain ahead for Honiara and Kuala Lumpur. Further north, warm and cloudy conditions for Hong Kong, Taipei and Hanoi. Fine and bright in Tokyo, Beijing and Shanghai. Let's head west. A few showers on the way for Baghdad and Beirut. Cloudy skies in Jerusalem and Islamabad. To Europe, sub-zero temperatures and rain on the way for Stockholm, while clouds move quickly over Athens, Berlin and Rome. To Africa, thunder and lightning will cause storms in Lagos and possibly Addis Ababa, partly cloudy skies in Cairo and Dakar, some showers to hit Johannesburg and Casablanca. To South America, some early morning drizzle in Panama City, heavy downpours for Caracas and Bogota. And for North America, warm and fine in LA and Dallas, humid and wet in Miami, Toronto and Havana, cloudy skies for Washington DC. Well, the coronavirus pandemic may have put the iconic Eurovision on hold, but it hasn't stopped the song contest from going ahead in another quirkier form. And Australia might not have someone, but it certainly will have something to cheer for.
The music of the earth has arrived.
Australia's next Eurovision hopeful is almost entirely generated by computer.
Welcome home, welcome home, oh, welcome home.
A Sydney music studio and Melbourne computer scientist united for the noble goal of winning the inaugural Eurovision AI competition.
I thought, computers, my thing, music, my thing, Holland, my thing, and being part of the Australian team for that, it was just perfect.
Event organisers approached the Uncanny Valley studio to see if they'd be interested in submitting Australia's entry. They jumped at the chance.
There's got to be drama for a start. The lyrics have to be perhaps a little bit bonkers, but not too much bonkers.
The product, a song called Beautiful the World.
All of the melody lines are AI. All of the lyrics are AI. Some of the vocals, if you listen really hard, some of the backing vocals are AI.
And what Team Australia hopes is the winning element, a koala-inspired beat drop.
We took native animal sounds like koalas, kangaroos, Tasmanian devils. The sound that it came out with was kind of not like a koala, not like anything, but it was kind of very unique. And we thought, let's put this into our song.
The song might not entirely make sense, but it's still an impressive feat.
AI is a difficult thing to grab, to understand, and I thought if we combine that with Eurovision, perhaps it's something that what makes sense to people.
The winner will be announced in May. Rachel Carey.
Vote for Australia!
SBS World News.
We're recapping our top stories now. New South Wales has become the third Australian state to announce the first tentative steps towards easing COVID-19 restrictions, but it came as 5 new deaths were reported from a Sydney aged care home that's faced one of the country's worst virus outbreaks. Relief for New Zealanders as level 4 strict lockdown is reduced, allowing an estimated 400,000 people to return to work. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization is warning the coronavirus crisis is far from over. The head of the UN agency says there are deep concerns that children are being exposed to other diseases by not being vaccinated. That is the world this Tuesday. If you missed any of tonight's bulletin, you can always catch up on the SBS News website shortly. And a reminder, you can also watch the bulletin live there or on our app. And don't forget, the late news bulletin with Catalina Flores is tonight at 10:35. But we'll leave you with one man's light relief from isolation in the Netherlands. From the team, good night.